The film begins by showing the toughness of a white Volkswagen Beetle named Herbie. This car was popular in the racing world, until finally it could not be used anymore due to severe damage. Herbie was then transported to a junkyard owned by Crazy Dave. But as it turned out, Herbie seemed alive. He looks shocked when he sees one of the cars destroyed. He also refused to be unloaded from the truck. In fact, Herbie can spit oil and throw his body parts at Dave because he doesn't want to be called an ugly car. With all his might, Dave and his men took Herbie down. But this car also tries its best to survive and doesn't want to be destroyed. When Dave was caught off guard, Herbie immediately ran away. But after a short walk, the tire is already leaking. Dave and his men give up, so they don't take Herbie to the crusher. In a different place, there was a girl named Margaret Peyton, who is usually called Maggie. She was attending her graduation ceremony. Maggie is the youngest of two siblings. Both of them love racing, and they are descendants of racer families. But only Ray Peyton Jr., Maggie's brother, was allowed to enter the game. Right now, Ray was having a hard time because his focus had decreased even during training sessions. At home, Maggie looked at the news articles about her grandfather, father, and brother neatly hanging on the walls. A moment later, Peyton, Maggie's father, comes to apologize for not celebrating Maggie's graduation properly. He also displayed Maggie's graduation certificate and then asked her to buy a graduation gift. Long story short, the next day, Peyton took Maggie to Dave's junkyard. He wanted to buy a used car for Maggie as a graduation present, because in a month, Maggie would be leaving. Maggie went around to have a look. She passed Herbie, but then came to a green Nissan. Though Herbie had been trying to get Maggie's attention. When Maggie was bidding for a green Nissan, suddenly, Herbie, who was being transported, crushed the green Nissan car down. Like it or not, Maggie brought Herbie home, because the other car was in much worse condition. After paying, Peyton checked Herbie's condition first. While Maggie waited, while she skated. Herbie seemed to like Maggie even more. After it was checked and declared that it could still be driven, Maggie got into the car. Maggie finds a letter that says please take care of Herbie. Whatever your problem, he will help you find the answer, but Maggie panicked when she put the key in, because Herbie was driving alone to a car repair shop that turned out to be Kevin's, Maggie's old friend. Herbie made a bit of a fuss for Kevin to fix it right away. But Maggie, who is still in shock, intends to return Herbie to Dave. Kevin, who has had a crush on Maggie for a long time, wants to help her fix Herbie. But before that, they would take Herbie around first as a test run to see what might need to be fixed. Kevin takes Maggie to an auto show at Fairplex to look at auto parts. But because there are often races held there, Maggie also hesitates to bring Herbie, which is considered a junk car. Hearing this, Herbie became annoyed and showed his skills on the highway. He drove at high speed uncontrollably. He just stopped after arriving at the Fairplex. Maggie then got out of the car quietly, hoping no one would recognize her. However, reality does not always match expectations. Just a few steps, a group of men were already shouting for Maggie. Instead of being embarrassed, Maggie was forced to disown the battered car as her own. A moment later, there was an uproar from everyone who greeted an up-and-coming racer, Trip Murphy. The man claimed to be invincible, even releasing a video game with himself as the first character. Feeling that Herbie had embarrassed her enough, Maggie decided to go home without bringing Herbie. But Herbie's horn kept going off. Instead of being the center of attention, Maggie severed the wires inside Herbie's body, which she responded with a jet of oil. Therefore, Maggie needed to change clothes. Apparently, Herbie was angry to hear that Maggie didn't want to admit him. At the same time, Kevin finds a helmet and racing suit with name Max in Herbie's trunk. The clothes were immediately worn by Maggie to replace her clothes, which were full of oil. And suddenly, Herbie pushed Maggie in and put on a helmet. Trip, who walked past them, had mocked Herbie. Then Herbie approached Trip's car and scratched it with the rear-view mirror. Everyone there was stunned, then cheered for Trip to race with the driver. Again, Herbie moved automatically beyond Maggie's control. Though Maggie herself didn't want to race. Surprisingly, Herbie's old machine still works. So Maggie is motivated to take it seriously. Herbie even performs unusual moves.
Okay, so that's how you want to do it?
At the end of the track, Maggie and Herbie manage to beat Trip. Because of this, Trip becomes angry that his pride has been trampled. He is defeated by a battered Beetle car. Upon returning to the workshop, Maggie reveals to Kevin that she feels Herbie is truly alive and connected to her. But Kevin thought that in truth, Maggie was simply denying her own abilities. On the other hand, one by one, Ray's sponsors began to resign after his last practice. Sally, a representative from BusPro, the only surviving sponsor, comes to show a news broadcast of Tripp being beaten by the white buggy number 53. Peyton realizes that it is the car he bought for Maggie. Peyton was disappointed in Maggie. He forbade his daughter to race not without reason, but because in the past, Maggie almost died while participating in a wild race. Peyton didn't want to feel the same way again. Maggie had to lie to her father. She says that Kevin's friend, Max, suddenly borrowed Herbie and used it for racing. Peyton felt guilty for getting mad at Maggie. He apologized before returning home. Neither of them realized Herbie was glancing at Sally's beautiful yellow new Beetle car. While on the other hand, Tripp's mental state was quite shaken because of the defeat he experienced yesterday. It had an impact on his reputation and career. Larry, his brother and manager, asked him not to think too much about the unofficial match. But Tripp instead asked for a rematch. He wants to have a 2-day open race with fantastic prize money. It aims to lure a racer with her white Beetle car to take part in the match. Tripp said, in that match, if he wins, then the white Beetle car must be destroyed. Meanwhile, Kevin showed the engine design that he would install on Herbie to make it more stable on the racetrack. But Maggie kept thinking about her father. Half of her heart still feels heavy to return to the race. In the middle of an argument between Maggie and Kevin, the newspaper page containing the announcement of the competition fell not far from Herbie. When Maggie wanted to go home, Herbie flew the newspaper so that Maggie and Kevin could clearly read it. Then, Kevin persuades Maggie to join the race just this one time. The prizes offered are very tempting. In addition, Maggie's family is indeed experiencing economic difficulties due to race sponsors dropping out one by one. With the money, Maggie could help her family and her own life. Some of the money may be enough to fix Kevin's workshop. Then, Maggie agreed to participate in the match. With Kevin, slowly, she cleaned Herbie's body, repairing the interior as well as the engine in a few days. While Tripp and Larry are busy analyzing what causes an old Beetle car to beat Tripp's race car. Scene moves to the house. Maggie, overhearing her father's conversation with Sally, reveals that in fact, Ray is not talented for racing. Sally had done her best to help Ray survive. Apparently, BusPro has also terminated its sponsorship contract with Ray Peyton Jr. Peyton asked for time until the race at the Speedway. If Ray doesn't win, then Peyton will be willing to give up his son. Hearing this, Maggie's desire to win the prize from the competition grew even greater. Long story short, the day of the open race competition arrived. Tripp, who knows Maggie and finds out that she is Ray's sister, then says hello. But he is very surprised to learn that Maggie has come not to support Ray, but to sponsor Max, the Beetle car driver who is actually Maggie herself. Tripp asks Maggie to meet him with Max, but Maggie argued that Max was meditating and couldn't be bothered. The race started. Whoever wins on this first day will have a match against Tripp tomorrow. Herbie finally made it to the top 5 stage. And in an instant, Max, the mysterious racer, aka Maggie, gets a lot of fans, thanks to her stunts on the track. Herbie slipped all the race cars one by one until he came out as the sole champion on the first day, which will compete against Tripp tomorrow. After the match, unexpectedly, Herbie met Sally's yellow Beetle again. Herbie tried to say hello and give it a signal. But the yellow car is not sensitive. Moments later, Kevin is shocked to see Herbie confronting Sally's car. They are like kissing. As a reward for today's success, Kevin gave Maggie a necklace with a 53 number pendant. Kevin hopes it can bring magic in tomorrow's match. Their romantic mood is disturbed by Tripp's arrival. Don't know what his intentions were, but he kept praising Maggie and offered her to try his racing car. Herbie felt something was wrong. He also felt jealous seeing Maggie, who looked very happy enjoying Tripp's car. While Maggie is having fun, Tripp launches a sinister plan to dismantle Herbie's engine, which of course fails. Herbie sprays Tripp's face with oil and hits him with Cap, then taunts Tripp. As a result, Tripp's plan failed. But he did not give up, he made another offer. Whoever wins the race will be entitled to the losing car. And Maggie agreed. The next day, Maggie's best friend, Charisma, comes to visit Maggie. But Maggie is about to get ready for the match. Maggie couldn't help but lie to Charisma that she had an appointment to watch her boyfriend race. This news made Maggie's family curious. Peyton, Ray, and Charisma came to the location to see Maggie's boyfriend in action. Unfortunately, that day, Herbie was sulking. He didn't want Maggie to trade him for Tripp's car. In fact, Herbie deliberately slowed down and stopped before reaching the finish line. Maggie was furious and she took off her helmet in front of everyone watching. Kevin tried to calm her down because there was still a chance in another match. But sadly, the deal was made. Tripp has the right to take and destroy Herbie. Kevin, who just found out about the bet, thought that Maggie had betrayed Herbie. Peyton was also disappointed. He said Maggie didn't care about honesty anymore. The only person Maggie was proud of right now was Charisma. She fully supports Maggie to be serious about what she wants, rather than being forced to work on something that is not her passion. Charisma's words made Maggie excited again. She went to redeem Herbie, who turned out to have been handed over to the Gladiator car location as prey for other cars. There, Herbie was scribbled on and hit many times until he was almost crushed. The owner of the place allowed Maggie to take Herbie for free if she managed to get Herbie out of the arena herself. Maggie entered the arena to find Herbie, who was already helpless. But when he sees Maggie in danger, Herbie jumps into action to save Maggie and throws Larry out. Maggie and Herbie escaped and survived, although several cars, including a giant truck, tried to block. Even Herbie can beat the giant truck. Maggie arrives at Kevin's workshop with a badly damaged Herbie. She begs Kevin to save Herbie and apologizes for her selfishness risking Herbie. At the Speedway racetrack, Ray tries his best to make it through the qualifying stages for the Nextel. He succeeded. However, after that, Ray's car lost control. Based on the doctor's examination, the vision in Ray's left eye no longer works. The doctor also advised Ray not to take part in the Nextel this week, fearing that Ray would have a more serious accident. Because he is already qualified, Ray needs a replacement driver so that his team can still participate in the race. And he suggested Maggie to take his place. But Peyton still couldn't let Maggie race. Maggie then pleaded with her father. Although she is very similar to her mother physically, racer genes run in her blood. She kept reassuring her father that she would not be hurt in this race. Bad news also came from the supplier at Kevin's workshop. Spare parts for Herbie cannot be sent because Kevin has not paid off the previous bill. Luckily, Ray came and he brought his team fully equipped to remodel Herbie. Ray also asked Maggie not to worry about their father. The next day, Tripp, as the previous champion, was determined to defend the title. Tripp is surprised to see Herbie's arrival. As far as Tripp knows, Herbie has been destroyed by Larry. Before the match, Maggie invites Herbie for a heart-to-heart conversation so they can better connect with each other. Maggie walked onto the track and was greeted by the fans. Herbie is the only Volkswagen that is allowed to enter the NASCAR Nextel Cup. Peyton watched Maggie from the television, while Maggie desperately hoped that her father could provide direct support in the arena. Now, all the racers are ready to warm up. After hearing the signal, then the real race began. Maggie had fallen far behind. But she didn't give up. She drove to a nearby car to use it as a spring so Herbie could start overtaking a few cars. Seeing Maggie's persistence, Peyton followed her to the location to watch his beloved daughter in action. Peyton's team also completed the pit stop quickly, keeping Herbie in the hunt. In the remaining 18 laps, Tripp managed to take the lead, which was slowly overtaken by Maggie. But several other cars tried to surround and beat Herbie. Because of that, Maggie is increasingly pessimistic about being able to continue this race. But suddenly, a familiar voice in the distance cheered Maggie up. He was sure Maggie would win the race. Therefore, Maggie steeled her resolve once again and she escaped the encirclement by running over an obstructing car. However, Herbie had an oil leak. Everyone suspected the Peyton team might be out of the race because of this problem. Kevin contacted Sally, who had a similar car. He borrowed Sally's car oil pan to save Herbie. Because it didn't fit Herbie too well, Kevin warned Maggie to avoid collisions as much as possible. Maggie wasn't expecting much now. She tells Herbie that she doesn't care what the outcome of this race is, as long as she doesn't lose Herbie. So moved, Herbie immediately drove before the inspection at the pit stop was over. Maggie and Herbie instantly overtook several cars and left one car at the front, Tripp's car. All the audiences turned their eyes to this one Beetle car. Focus on the chase between Maggie and Tripp. For the sake of his self-esteem, Tripp cheated. He kept grazing Herbie and cornering him against the field wall in order to complete his revenge. But in the umpteenth attempt, Tripp tried to hit Herbie instead and hit his own car against the wall until the car overturned, blocking Herbie's path. All the audience got tense. It was impossible to dodge at high speed at such close range. But miraculously, Herbie raced across the fence and led Maggie to a successful first place over the finish line. Peyton was very proud of Maggie, as well as Charisma and Ray. While Trip goes on a rampage screaming that Maggie's car is possessed. Of course, people thought he was crazy for losing the game. Kevin approached Maggie, and Herbie helped Kevin get closer to Maggie. At the end of the film, Peyton seems to be warning someone not to forget that there will be a big race, so he must return home safely. It turns out that Peyton is talking to Herbie, who is in love with Sally's car, who turns out to be able to blink like Herbie too.